blew my mind. Hello and welcome to this week's Serious Social Live. Today we'll be discussing the topic of trusting the process and what that means for designers, social media. I'm Ollie, Farnden, digital designer here at Immediate Future, and I'm honoured to be joined by Chantal, our fabulous senior designer. Say hello, Chantal.
Hi.
We will be discussing the challenges we face as designers and how we should all learn to trust the process. So let's kick it off. Shant, so what is the process for you? And I'll discuss what it means to me.
So, I mean, the process is literally how do you get from A to Z and all those little steps in between.
It's how do you do anything in life that requires a series of steps? It's how do you make a cup of tea in the morning? You go from boiling water, putting it into the mug, everything is a process, and you need to trust that you're doing it right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there's been so many instances of processes, and it's so important. And we've gone through, and especially in design, we do so much design work there where we go from doing something and then going through every step to get to the end result. And sometimes, I'm sure sometimes we forget some of the steps, or we just neglect some of the steps, and we're always like, whoa, why does this not look great?
Right? And I think that's also important to realize that in between your steps, in between getting from the start to the finish, it's going to look like absolute poo, right? And we need to remember that and realize that we haven't quite finished and we haven't got to the end yet.
Yes.
And it's important to let other people realize that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many instances where I've called you and gone, why does this not look good? Why have I done everything correct all the way through? And you're like, oh, well, you just missed this one step. And then it's like, oh, yeah. And you have, it's about like trusting yourself to know that you're doing it correctly. But you shouldn't be berated for missing a step, because mistakes is all part of it.
Yeah, and it's also trusting that you can take a step back and maybe let a new pair of eyes look at something, because you may have missed something along the way, like you said earlier. It's good to have that collaboration and say, hey, could you just look over this for me and see, because it's not quite vibing for me yet.
Exactly that, and that is in itself part of a design process, and again, it doesn't have to be always part of design. It could be like if you're writing a post for social, just having someone overlook it and go, oh yeah, that's great, or you should do this, or make amends. That's part of the process of making a social post, right? And
it's life.
It's life. Like, trusting the process, you need to trust everything that you do and have faith in yourself. Like, you don't want to start to make a cup of tea and go, oh, I forgot to boil the water, I can't do it, and you're faltering at the first hurdle. Like, that's not trusting the process. That's just not.
That's hindering yourself.
And that is the main thing. And you have to have gifts of patience and everything just to understand that you're doing it right. That is the process of getting something done.
Patience and the ability to allow yourself to have mistakes as well.
Exactly.
That's how you learn. That's how you learn your process.
And from learning, it makes the process easier. So going back to the tea example, you learn that the kettle needs to be boiled 2 minutes before making the cup of tea. You don't want to stand there and wait for the kettle to boil. It's all about experience and learning. And once you get the experience, your process becomes easier. And that is why you have seniorities in businesses, because they have that experience. So I think this whole conversation about we've spoken about doing everything in steps, making sure that you do it right. But I think it coming to light in my brain anyway came from that Royal Blood video that I showed you.
It was a really good video.
It blew my mind. It kind of I was just like, oh, like there's an actual process that you have to do, and there's process in everything. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
So luckily we were able to ask some of our more client-facing colleagues about the process in terms of how it relates to clients. So the first question I asked was if there were any instances of pushback on the start of a campaign, and if there were any fears of something not working out straight away. So the first response we got was, realistically, trusting the process is pretty internal. I may have some early designs and I think that looks off, but I will always trust that next iteration will look better. And it's true. It's about trusting that something, if it doesn't look right, you don't want to show something that's half baked. You don't go through 2 steps and go, okay, have a look at this, because that should be considered as a mock-up. It shouldn't be considered as the final product. And it's about getting through those steps to the end result, and then looking at the end result as the final piece, and then going, oh, let's judge it on that, instead of it looking at it at stage 3.
I will say though, I think it is quite good to share your process with clients and stuff like that. But they have to understand this isn't the final product.
But that again is part of the process. It's part of showing at every point where you think it's necessary, but it should never be looked at as a final product. As a thing. And that links to social media, about how we go into expecting instant results. We go in and we start making posts, we start putting yourself out there straight away in the start of a campaign, or even start of a new social profile, and expecting the results to come in instantly, because that doesn't work like that. There's a process in which to build an audience, and there's a process in which to get the messaging, the visuals all looking correct. And I think
you'd be very lucky if you went viral overnight without any kind of social media presence.
I mean, exactly. And
it happens, but very rarely.
And it takes time. It takes effort to get into, patience as well, just to make sure that every post that you do, every bit of copy that you do is on brand, or saying what you want it to do. And you have to build up on the last post. You have to keep on going, keep on plugging, and then that's how you get to that building and trusting the process in that way. So another question we asked were, are there instances where there was a lack of trust in what we were being produced? So it's all about saying about we should trust that we're doing is correct and getting to the end result. So the response we got, that there was lots of times the client was initially wary, but they do trust us to advise them and push content forward and work how it works in social media. And we're the experts. And that links to the experts in everything. So you could be a social post copywriter, and if you write one sentence and then you go, hey, or you put that out, it's not trusting the process. You need to make sure that you go through every of the steps. Yeah.
And your steps could be chaotic, but they make sense to you. And it's still, again, we're saying this a lot, but it is a process.
It's just when we say trust the process, it's mostly having faith in yourself and you shouldn't get to one hurdle, like you reach a block in your brain about how to write the next sentence. You should take a step back, trust that you know what you're doing is right, trust that you've done all the steps appropriately up until that point to then move forward.
And don't be afraid to ask for a little help if you need it. No shame in that.
No shame in asking for help, no shame in mistakes, because you always learn from that, like we said before. And so finally, we asked if they were trusting the process is crucial to creating brand recognition, and if clients should not expect instant results. So that's what we said before. So with the first result is, whatever the campaign, it is important to not expect results straight away. There's a lot to go into social, so patience and trust is key. So reiterating what we've said, it's just about taking a deep breath, taking the necessary steps to get to the end result, and trusting that you've done it all correct. And it links to everything. And lastly, we had the response of saying that it's especially true when early designs come through and it's just a mess of concepts and colors, or they're just an animation reference to competitors that have done something cool, and we can feel like we can iterate and improve. It's hard to see that the end product at this stage and recognize its benefits of all the work that's going into building the brand recognition amidst the creative process. But we need to trust the process and trust that designers are ultimately deliver eye-catching and interesting results. And that's true. It's all about, it's like when we start off doing an animation, we don't look at stage 3 of the steps that we need to take and go, this is stage 1, because then it's working backwards, and that could be your process. I'm not saying that's bad process, but trust that what you're doing is correct, basically.
Yeah.
Like, and having the vision and having the faith that the end result will be what you want it to be.
Yeah, and even if it isn't, it's still something, and you've still learned from that experience and that process that you can then apply to your other things, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about learning and just going for it.
Going for it, definitely. Yeah. And if we just bring it back to social media, just if you're a brand and you go and you post something straight away and you go, okay, let's look at the results for this. The first post, it's obviously going to get some results, but you need to build upon that. It's like trust the process.
Trust the process.
Trust that the next post will iterate on that, and the next post will improve on that, and that you build it up. These are the steps to build up a social presence. The steps to building up the campaign. You can't go straight in expecting results.
Yeah.
And like, as you said, unless it's extraordinarily rare for that to happen.
Yeah.
I just think everything needs faith. Everything needs to trust.
Faith, patience, and trust, and a little bit of fairy dust.
A little bit of fairy dust doesn't help. I mean, does help. Sorry, it doesn't help, but that'll be bad, right? Does help in making sure that it makes sense. And this realization really just came to me after watching that video we shared, that everything requires you to do step by step. Have the vision, have the faith that the end result is going to look the way you want it to look. Or the way you want it to read, the way you want it to, everything that you do, the way you want it to taste. Cooking is a perfect example of trusting the process. You can't go halfway through the cooking stage and falter at the first hurdle because you couldn't do something, right?
Yeah.
Everything. And it's really iterating that processes on social media is the same as anywhere. Trust, do the steps, get it right. Get it right first. It doesn't have to be first time. You can take a step back, but trust that is part of it, and that you can always improve.
Yeah, and you're learning from that,
right? Yeah, I mean, you've had many instances with your own work where you have to trust the process, right?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's times where I'm like, okay, so this idea of mine is still cooking in my brain. I don't quite have the skills for it yet, but you know, give me just a few more other things and I'll get there. But it's like that with everything, you know, you just have to trust in yourself and again, trust the process.
People are going to be tired of us saying trust the process, right? We're going to have to get a counter up.
Hey, it is what it is.
It is what it is. But I think we've kind of reached a closing point, because I think we both agree trusting the process is important. So on social media and design, anything that you do, it's all about making sure that you take the steps. So I think that's all from us. So remember that you will find this edited video in your feed soon, along with the podcast from wherever you get your podcast from. And finally, we'll be taking a little break from Serious Social Live this month, but we'll be back bright-eyed and bushy-tailed next month. For now, goodbye, and have a great rest of your Friday.